In the many categories of games we're going to discuss on Museum of Gaming, perhaps the most fun are those which never got anything like the love they deserved at the time of their release. This week we'll be talking about a game which sold just 60,000 copies across the entirety of Europe. With worldwide sales just under 400,000, Chibi-Robo was equalled or beaten in sales by an imperial ton of video games. But among the most embarrassing are Disney's Brother Bear for the Game Boy Advance, Six Flags Fun Park for the Wii, and Ed, Ed and Eddie, the Miss Ed Ventures for the PS2. Along with 2005's Advance Wars spin-off Battalion Wars, Chibi-Robo was one of the games unfairly dragged into obscurity by the unpopularity of the GameCube, itself an unfairly maligned system. Chibi-Robo was the idea of Skip Ltd, a Japanese developer whose only other game for the Nintendo GameCube was a bizarre Animal Crossing-style life simulator going by the name of Giftopia. Giftopia was never a success, and its planned English translation was scrapped in 2003, but it was evidently enough of a good idea to attract prolific game designer Shigeru Miyamoto to come on board as a producer. In light of that star quality, Skip received some favourable attention and in early 2003 announced another game, Chibi-Robo, to be published by Bandai. This incarnation of the game was markedly different from the eventual end product. For one, it was originally conceived as a point-and-click adventure game, a genre almost completely disappeared at the time of the game's development. According to an IGN preview of the time, there were multiple Chibi-Robo, who, in the game's beta, had to defend their inventor, Professor Sendagaya, from the machinations of two burglars, Cookie and Arnie. The Chibi-Robo were controlled with an on-screen mouse cursor, and were developed further as the player made decisions while playing with them. All of the above made no impact on the final game, a platform adventure set in a reasonably open world, featuring a dysfunctional family home instead of an inventor's workshop, and with only one Chibi-Robo to control. It sounds a long way from the original concept, and it is, but that's no real surprise when the game was put on indefinite hold some way before release. Once again though, Miyamoto saved the day. Signing on as a senior producer, Mr. Miyamoto retooled the gameplay to give the player direct character control, and publishing rights switched over to Nintendo. After a development cycle totaling 4 years, Chibi-Robo finally hit Japanese shelves in the middle of 2005, although it wouldn't appear in the West until February of the following year. Given that even in Nintendo's native Japan the GameCube was struggling, being outsold many times over by the PlayStation 2, sales figures were mediocre, and Chibi-Robo was not any kind of smash hit. But the game did inspire positive press, and received sequels for both the DS and 3DS years down the line, as well as a release on Wii in the form of a new Play Control entry, once again only in Japan. These are the Sandersons. Despite a strange little girl who wears a frog face on her head all the time, they seem at first glance to be a generic family unit, with a father working for a toy company and a friendly, muddy-pawed dog. But all is not well when Chibi-Robo arrives as a present with the intention of helping out with the chores. He starts out suitably small, scrubbing floors with a toothbrush and tidying up loose paper, but eventually is drawn into the family's misfortunes, as well as the lives of the other toys inhabiting the house. Chibi is helped out by his assistant Television, whose purpose seems to be providing exposition and tutorials for new players. Chibi can upgrade his capabilities, including his initially small battery capacity, by upgrading at the Chibi house in the living room. While this starting environment is the only one available initially, other areas of the house become available relatively quickly once the player has learned the ropes. Playing the role of antagonist are the Spy Doors, originally created as a new toy by Mr. Sanderson, but now loose and threatening the safety of both Chibi and the house. Eventually gaining a weapon for himself, Chibi has them to contend with, as well as the chores, the family's stresses, and the eventual role of reviving the immobile Giga-Robo. There's a lot of content here, and it's all presented fairly organically, with a Metroidvania exploration style which rewards the player's explorative tendencies with new abilities and upgrades, and, in turn, new areas to explore. One of the best features of Chibi-Robo is the titular robot's rechargeable battery. This simple meter, only one value, acts as Chibi's stamina, health meter, ammunition counter and mission timer. Whether walking, zapping spy doors, flying around using his helicopter blade head or wiping doggy paw prints from the laminate flooring, Chibi is using power. He also suffers power loss when hit, and the constantly ticking timer means that long periods of inaction during missions are not wise. He can recharge at no cost using the house's power outlets, which also double, Metroid style again, as save points. There's also one particularly lovely mechanic, subtly worked into the game, which is easy to miss if you aren't tuned into it. Take a listen. When Chibi walks, his footsteps create a melody to accompany the ambient background music, the tempo and intensity of which also vary based on Chibi's speed and actions. It's only a small touch, but it shows a lot of care was given to environmental quality, and enhances the light and fluffy tone of much of the game. If the Sanderson household has lots to do during the day, things take an even more interesting turn once night arrives. Unmoving and unresponsive while the sun is up, the toys inhabiting the house suddenly come to life, giving Chibi-Robo information, including gossip about the family which he wouldn't otherwise hear. They also assign quests and give the world a sense of life derived from their roughly being similar sizes to Chibi-Robo, the developer having stated that humans were on much too big a scale to be relevant characters to a tiny robot. Among other enjoyable appearances, we have a giant caterpillar, an army of egg soldiers, and Captain Plankbeard, a pirate without ship or crew who needs Chibi's help in order to get sailing again. This may be reminding you of a very Japanese-style Toy Story, and you'd be quite right, but that's certainly no bad thing. Last but not least, Chibi gains the ability to interact with characters in different ways through the use of changeable suits, in the tradition of Super Mario Bros. 3. These poses elicit different reactions from various characters, ranging from the ability to access the kitchen and pleasing Mr. Sanderson in the case of the Drake Redcrest suit, through the ability to return home instantly granted by the trauma suit and acquired by running out of power, to the rather adorable pyjama suit which is used to pass the time. The sheer variety offered to the player in terms of tools for keeping the house neat, and the combination of tools and suits used for navigation, meant that Chibi-Robo was one of the very few major sandbox games to be high quality and released for the Nintendo GameCube. It executed its mechanics very well and had a high quality localization job which retained much of the original game's humour. On a more negative note, however, Chibi-Robo was probably the last great exclusive game ever released for that system. Only 50 games came out for the GameCube during its dying days in 2006 and 2007, as developers and publishers, including Nintendo, abandoned the ailing system entirely in favour of the next generation systems, PS3, Xbox 360 and the Wii. If you were a GameCube owner during those twilight years, the list of worthwhile releases could be whittled down to this, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, and Odama. Still, while the console might have been dying a painful death, players could at least take a big dose of Chibi-Robo to ease its passing. I hope you've enjoyed learning about the vivid and lovable world of Chibi-Robo, and hope you've come away knowing something you didn't before. Who knows, you might even try out the game. Next week we'll be grabbing our toothbrushes and scrubbing up another of gaming's loose ends by talking about probably the only Nintendo game to see its worldwide release limited exclusively to Scandinavia. It's Mr. Gimmick! Until then, keep gaming, and I'll see you next time.